Welcome to another episode of SJS Recommends. Today we are gonna talk about one of my favorite hip-hop albums of all time. It's Danny Brown's Atrocity exhibition from 2016. And the name might be familiar to you even if you don't know this album, because it's a reference to a famous 20th century novel by G.J. Ballard, and then also a Joy Division song of the same name. I think it's from the Closer album, which is obviously a huge classic album. But I'll do a bit of an intro to this album where I go through some basic details about it and then some critical reception before we get into it more personally. So this was Danny Brown's fourth album. I've heard all of his albums. I like all of them, but to me this is clearly the magnum opus. But I think his earlier album, Triple X, is pretty much as good. But I think if I had to choose one, it would be Atrocity Exhibition. This album has lots of features. So we have Kendrick Lamar is the most famous one, and that's a banger feature. Then we have A.B. Soul, Earl Sweatshirt, Be Real, the great R&B singer Kelela, and Petit Noir. And then this was produced mainly by Paul White, but then also the one and only Alchemist, Black Milk, Evian Christ, Petit Noir, and Playa Hayes. That's great album cover. Obviously, like it fits the themes of the album really well. There were 3 singles from this album: When It Rain, Pneumonia. Pneumonia might be my favorite song of the album, but it's hard to say. Then Really Though, which is the Kendrick song and the most famous song. And I could talk a bit about the critical reception of this album, because it was very much critically successful, even though it's a very weird album. But for example, in Metacritic, it has 85 out of 100, which is really high. The Guardian gave it a 5-star review. Pitchfork gave it 8.5. Rolling Stone gave it 4. In All Music, it's 4.5. There are some good kind of short comments here from some critics that I think sum up the album really well. So, for example, David Jeffries from All Music said that Atrocity Exhibition is Danny Brown at his least diluted, almost unrelentingly grim and completely engrossing, which is true. And then another one here from another person: yet beyond this wired mix of post-punk anxiety, splintered techno elements, and haunting soul samples, it's Danny Brown's rhyming ability that ultimately sees the LP flourish. And yeah, so it was a critical success, and I think it's a fairly popular album. Obviously, it's not as popular as like mainstream rap, but for experimental stuff, it's very popular. And I think we cannot really call him underground anymore when he has like at least like a couple million fans, and he has a very successful podcast as well, which I would highly recommend, called The Danny Brown Show. And he's actually like as funny as any stand-up comedian. He's just one of those guys that has that kind of natural funniness. There's this one podcast on YouTube where he talks about his experiences in prison, and you would think that that would be dark, but it's actually one of the most hilarious things one could ever see. And there's also his own Danny Brown Show where he did an episode with JPEG Mafia last year, which is absolutely hilarious, where he gives some relationship advice, for example. I'm not gonna say anything more about it as it is pretty vulgar, but it's like funny, one of the funniest things I've ever seen, and I would highly recommend his podcast. It's great. But anyway, now into this album. So lyrically, it's pretty much a concept album. It's about, like the first song title is, it's about his downward spiral. It's about his struggles with addiction to drugs and alcohol. He also used to deal drugs, and he went to a county prison for almost a year. And obviously county prisons in US, in Detroit, are absolutely horrendous, because he's a Detroit rapper, by the way, and obviously we all know what type of place Detroit is. It's not a very nice place to live. So Yeah, so he has lots of trauma with mental illness, addiction, things like that, and he deals with those things in a very vulgar way and very honest way, showing his emotions and stuff, and he manages to put some dark humor here as well, of course, as he always does. And he does his unhinged delivery, which was at first really hard for me to get into the first time I listened to this album, but then when I went back to it, it became like one of my favorite things ever. So, but for example, in the second track, Tell Me What I Don't Know, he does his natural voice. But anyway, now I'm gonna ask Altaz what he thought about this album. My throat is so dry, so I have to take some water. Yeah.
When I put this album on from the first track, just listening to how the first track opens up downward spiral, I was like, this is amazing. Like, what is this? Like, this is amazing. But as I just kept listening track after track, I was just like, this is, and I don't like to, and after I'd read it and like listen to it through, and I don't know what art, like how it changes, how it changes, and it's this word, I don't want to throw it around loosely, but I just felt like this might be a masterpiece of an album, because being someone who's listened to a lot of hip hop, to experience someone doing something so creative at this point in the journey of that genre, and then but being so path breaking and then being so unique, but like you said, with it's because it's a concept album, that the themes are very much there to be uncovered in the flow from song to song, and then each song is like building on things that are going on in different directions, and in some ways it shouldn't all go together, but it does. And it's as insane as the downward spiral the person's having, Atrocity exhibition. It's insanity, it's madness. It even reminds me of novels like Catch 22. And yeah, I just absolutely loved it. And as I showed you in the pre-chat, I had to just pick it up on vinyl, which is, this is the cover you were talking about, which is the guy getting x-rayed, which is significant in the Ballard novel as well. And really good inserts as well, just showing all kinds of insanity, x-ray things, madness, what this film is about. So I mean, this album is about. So yes, absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it's such a like completely unique album. There isn't the one hip hop album that I've ever heard that sounds like this, and I've also
Yeah.
listened to quite lots of experimental hip hop from like something as hardcore as Death Grips or Dalek, or these types of like very abrasive, weird hip hop artists, and yeah, they are as hardcore as this, but in a very different way. It's like interesting because this week I've been binge listening to like lots of different music, and there've like been a few hip hop albums that I also listened to. So I listened to, for example, Ice Cube's America's Most Wanted and Death Certificate albums, and then the famous The Chronic by Dr. Dre, which is obviously a banger of an album, but obviously those sound nothing like Atrocity Exhibition. It almost feels like a different genre almost, because it's so different. And I absolutely love the soundscapes in Atrocity Exhibition, even though they are weird and dark and grimy, and like, for example, the Pneumonia song has this like really weird beat, and then there are these couple of songs that have like almost this kind of weird punk rock, krautrock, like krautrock. So krautrock was this again German genre that was pretty similar to progressive rock, with bands like Khan and things. So it like reminds me of weird stuff like that, even though it's completely different than hip hop. And then there's the song Ain't It Funny, which is one of my favorites, which is this kind of more danceable, absolutely nuts song. And that has like a very different beat again, something that you would dance at a club. So there's a great variety here as well. And when you listen to a song like Dance in the Water and I get wet, I get wet,
Mhm,
I get wet, like
mhm.
it's absolutely insane and completely different from some of the other tracks again. And then there are these slower tracks like Get High, like when I get high, like it's very
Yeah,
slow, low paced and not
yeah,
like very danceable. So such a great variety that, and I think variety is something that often lacks in many hip hop albums, whether they are great or not. That maybe many hip hop albums are like that. All the songs sound pretty much the same, but it's not the case here.
yeah. It's interesting you mentioned Ice Cube because what I was going to say is you listen to this album and you're clearly aware that Danny Brown is a highly intelligent person, and that doesn't mean like Ice Cube. There have been intelligent, like very intelligent rappers. Not saying that any rapper is unintelligent, but what I'm saying is that there are those rappers like Public Enemy, Ice Cube that are talking about history, black consciousness, like power systems, prison systems, and all that. And Danny Brown's doing it from the perspective. It's much more abstract art kind of thing. It's much more the feeling of being in that distorted world. So it's like a world of distortion. So with the lyrics plus the different, like you said, the different productions, the musical choices, even the instruments that are being sampled or used or being played live, I don't know, it's creating this distorted world and this experience, so you can feel that it's almost like Cronenberg, like this kind of certain songs can make you feel that this person's like skin is crawling, or they could very much like be seeing like insects crawling out of their skin, like you can feel their madness, their insanity, but in the world, the insanity of the world they're in. And then there's this hallucination also between the tracks, like he's deteriorating but he's also hallucinating, because we're kind of going back and forth in time. It feels like he's in this downward spiral, he's having this episode, and then in his episode some of his memories are tied to the days where he was drug dealing, and he was the man, and he only cared about the money, and getting the car and the girls, or the part where it's all that money has resulted in debauchery. um, and like you said, there is that thing in that one song where he talks about, oh, I make money and I spend it as soon as I have it. So there are these very dark, cynical, disturbing lyrics, and then yet they're still being danceable, so it creates this odd experience. um, as we were just talking about Kendrick Lamar, and like us, some of the lyrics are can be heavy, yet they're danceable and you're having fun. So there's a sense of irony, there's a sense of entertainment, there's a sense of this atrocity exhibition that is the human being is being presented to you for your entertainment, and you should be kind of disturbed by that you're dancing to something and then there's this person basically going insane, kind of like the film Network, which I just saw yesterday. So um really amazing album. Every single track I loved. I love Rolling Stone. You said Tell Me What I Don't Know. I love that song because that's like what we all feel when you're trapped in the thing and you're trying to get out, and you're like, you seems like the people who are not in a situation like yours must have figured something out in this world. That's why they're not in, maybe in this situation, and you are. So tell me what I don't know. So each of the songs are so meaningful, um, and interesting.
And of course, there's little hope in the end with the song "Hell for It,"
Yes.
where he talks about like, "I will give hell for them," and that he's gonna like
Yeah.
continue to do music and these types of things and trying to find the silver lining
Yes.
in things. So that's a really good ending to the album that started with a song called Downward Spiral and then it ends with a bit more hopeful note. But I think many kind of more casual fans of Danny Brown, when they hear the drug songs and stuff, they don't like realize that it's like introspective stuff, and
Mm.
he's not like say that this is like a great life. He even says in the album a couple of times that you shouldn't do these things like I did. Like this isn't a good thing. But some people obviously will read stuff like that it's kind of glamorizing drug use and things like that. And often that's like with many people who don't like really look into hip hop lyrics, that when they hear gangster rap, they think, yeah, I want to be a gangster too, even though it's actually, the album is not saying that it's great to be a gangster, but it's talking more about like very socially consciously about racism and how societal oppression and things like that lead to people being gangsters, and it's not saying that, yeah, you should all become gangsters, but people often misinterpret these types of lyrics that are very vulgar.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is starting the album in the most kind of as a warning sign. I mean, he's having this breakdown because he's gone to the excesses, or he's gone to these places where you just go to find, I don't know, peace or escape or whatever, or to convince yourself you're now figured it out, or you're now okay, or whatever, or you have, that's the only loop you have to kind of, do that, to just kind of party your pain away. And then it's resulting in a breakdown. So he's actually, like you said, that the introspection is the main part of this whole album. I think that's why it's like, for me, I loved it, because I was like, it's very introspective. He's having this breakdown, but breakdowns are a way that you review, and he's now thinking about all these things. He's trying to make sense of the insanity. He just sees this drug fueled insanity, this not only just drug fueled, but this profit pursuit, make money, you know and he's gotten into this thing, and then he's just going along, and then he's ended up in this breakdown, and then this is where he has time to break it apart and say, okay, where did it start? Where were the problems? What was my pain? What was my confusion? What is my And I agree with you that by the time you get to the last track, it's there's some clarity returning to his mind. So it starts with a breakdown, and there's some clarity at the end, which makes it a nice, hopeful loop. And the track right before it, Get High, is really trying to get away for seconds in a life, like just for a little while, to take the pain away. So it's like between the two tracks, there's a nice growth, because Get High, take the pain away, take a break, gives you a little bit of break from everything, all these problems you have. And it has a nice kind of almost gospel like note, like in church, oh, I'm getting something from my soul. But it's just a small break. But the true answer is in finding greater clarity than just in those moments, but those moments help. So the last two tracks form a nice kind of growth, but a lot of the tracks have a lot of insanity. I love the drum and bass use. It actually reminded me of the Outkast song "Bombs Over Baghdad," and in one of the tracks, he actually quotes "Bombs Over Baghdad," "Cure for cancer, cure for AIDS, keeps going on tour for days." Like, it's a quote from the actual song. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool that you could feel that Outkast vibe when Outkast was trying to push boundaries in terms of musicality and even message in the music, and he's inspired by them. He's kind of building on that, and then he's quoting back. So I could feel that. I could also feel him kind of quoting Detroit house in a way, because of Detroit's known for like house music in the 90s. So there is a dance kind of sound that's not, like you said, straight connected with hip hop, but almost going into kind of dance, might even some punk and all that. So there's lots there. There's lots there in this album.
And I know Danny Brown also has like a very eclectic taste in music. I've seen him like wearing shirts from metal bands and like in social media recommending albums that have nothing to do with hip hop. And I think you can really hear it in the music, even though he didn't produce it himself, that there are lots of influences from many different places, and again the Kendrick feature is really good. Like that song is so good. It has this like very like great like beat that has this loop and
Yeah.
this fun kind of melody to it, and it's very danceable and stuff. And it has like that has like really classic type of sound. It actually reminds me a bit of that "You Don't Know" song with 50 Cent, Eminem, Lloyd Banks,
Yeah.
and Cashish.
Yeah.
That you have several rappers and it sounds all badass and stuff. Like I love those types of hip hop songs when we have like several rappers and it's quite kind of aggressive and stuff. Like I love those types of tracks.
Yeah, and it really does like has that ominous sound. There's this ominous sound that goes on many tracks, but really don't really has it that downward spot. It's like very ominous, very intimidating, very dark. Uh, but even at times when I heard his zaniness, I feel like that zaniness being from Detroit, of course, he is not trying to hide from the fact that obviously Eminem, with his style of kind of going into these fueled hallucinations and insanities and even sometimes murderous fantasies, is sort of being homaged there as well. But of course, it's a whole unique own thing. Like Danny Brown's his own artist, whether he's inspired by Outkast or Eminem or whatever artist, he's his own artist. There's no one like him. You can definitely tell that, and the production is just insane. I mean, amazing production on every track. The sonics, um, yeah, it's just it's a very special album. It's a very unique album, and it made you excited for okay, all these possibilities that still exist for the genre if there are artists like that exist. Um, and
Yeah, and
kind of go ahead.
and his collaboration with JPEG Mafia from last year was just again my second favorite album of the year. It's so insanely good. It's pretty much as good as Atrocity Exhibition. It's also very unhinged and weird, but in a bit of a different way than this. So it's just so good. And he also released a solo album last year called Caranta, which has lots of these introspective lyrics, but in a very calmer way. Like most of it is like with his like regular voice and not with the like the crazy voice that he does. And it's a really good album and very different as well. So his whole
Yes,
catalog is worth checking out.
I mean, I listened to him for the first time indirectly because of that, because you were talking about JPEG Mafia and Scaring Them Hoes and how much you loved it. And so I ended up listening to it on your recommendation, well, by watching your channel. And I was like, oh, this is really good. Like, this is really good. And this is really different. And that's when I kind of heard of Danny Brown. And then he has that unique voice. And then, of course, he's on the Freddie Gibbs album on one of the tracks. But I never listened to a full album of his. Never did I even think about how I'd feel for a full album of his, because I was like, he's like interesting, but I never thought. But yeah, when I listened to, I mean, this is my favorite hip hop recommendation that you've made so far. I've enjoyed all of them, but this one to me stands out as like, yeah, I love this one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's again by far my favorite of the three too, and the one that I listen to the most. And even though it's such insane music, I'm like almost always in the mood for it that I can put these tracks on, and it works really well both as an album, but also the songs work really well individually.
Yeah, and I love how it sits stays as a whole piece too. Like you said, yeah, individually the tracks are great, but it's like if you put on the first one, you'll probably listen to it all the way through. It's hard to stop this album. It's hard to stop at a certain point and say, okay, that's it. Like I listened to 6 tracks. You kind of put it on and you can just sit there and go on the whole journey, and it's just so great.
And it's one of those rare albums where I like every single song, and I wouldn't like change anything about it. It's just the perfect length, just like perfect length for a hip hop album. And I think many of the 70-80 minute long hip hop classics, even though they are great, they often have bit of filler in there, but this one doesn't have any filler. So it's just such a great album, one of the best albums of the 2010s, whether we talk about hip hop or any other genres.
And since you're a cinephile and you're, in a way, a lot of times you're talking about movies, even though you're talking about arts in the movie, that track Lost, where he's like, I'm Kubrick with 2 bricks. Yeah. That's a great cinematic line. Another one maybe you won't appreciate as much, but I'm Spielberg with ill words. So he shouts out 2. So that's I love that track too. That the loop in Lost. That girl is like, like it's another great track, yeah.
And the track is also great where we have the R&B singer Kelela. She has a beautiful voice, and her own stuff is good as well. So.
Yeah, that's probably the most conventional track, like the more R&B, where you can kind of hear the R&B hip hop kind of history in that track. It's the least seen. It's a great track though. And Dance in the Water, like you said, is that bossa nova. Like you never think like bossa nova could be used in hip hop, and oh my god, what a party track! Just wow, it gets you excited every time.
Yeah, Pneumonia has like pretty fun lyrics.
Oh, Pneumonia
like,
too, yeah.
I'm smoking dough. I'm smoking dough, dough, dough. I gotta have a pound of artichoke.
Yeah. 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 Oh my god. Yeah. There's so much dissonance in that track. And he's talking about that whole cycle of dealing, spending, and drug abuse as like a form of sickness, pneumonia. And then there has the spacey electronic loops and stuff, and clamor and crashing. Like, yeah, Pneumonia is great. Yeah. Yeah, what can you say? I mean, you could talk about every track as a own episode. That's how good it is.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you loved this album again. I was kind of expecting that you might not like it as much because it's so different than many of the classic hip hop that you really love. So, but I'm really glad that you were open-minded and you fell in love with it, and it kind of gives me lots of confidence for the future that I can go with these really weird albums, whether it's hip hop or something else. So,
yeah, and I mean, I appreciate that. I think at the end of the day, it's not even. I didn't say it when we talked about the Yoshida movie, but sometimes it's not even about whether you like it or don't like it immediately. It's really about pushing yourself, because that is the way we get to, I don't know, learn about the world, learn about ourselves. I mean, and different things. So I love that. So, and I love also hearing how you kind of discovered this, how you got into it, how you feel about an artist, and all these kinds of things. I really enjoyed that interaction that as well, to kind of hear your perspective on how you found this piece of music or art, and how it impacted you and how it influenced you. So yeah.
Like I said, there are lots of great interviews with him and stuff on YouTube where he talks about his life in Detroit and in the prison and stuff, which kind of add to the album experience when you learn more about like his background and stuff.
Yeah, I'll definitely go and watch some of those.
Yeah, and they are just so entertaining as well. So yeah, it's like watching almost like a comedy film or something because they're so funny.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, but yeah, we can. I mean, one thing I mentioned that obviously I love this website, Rate Your Music, and this is actually in their top 50 albums of all time. It's so highly rated there, but like that website, there are lots of people who love more experimental music, so albums like this are often like very highly rated there. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah.
And that was actually, I think, the way I originally heard about the album like a few years ago, and like I think I said I didn't like it when I first heard it, but then it took me a couple of years to go back to it, and then it just clicked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can often be like that. I feel like
Yeah.
your brain processes, it starts putting things together even after you've seen it or heard something. It's like you never know. So that's why it's always important to explore.
Yeah. Now in the end, I'll mention some of the albums we have coming in the near future, and I actually have thought of a couple that I haven't put into the schedule quite yet. So next we have Let My Children Hear Music by Charles Mingus, which is one of his best albums in my opinion. Absolutely amazing, and I think Altaz will love that one. I mean, how can you not love Mingus? Like, he's just one of the goats. And then after that, bit of a more lesser known jazz album, but it's Sam Rivers Crystals, which is more of like a free jazz album. Although I think it's probably a bit more accessible than Cecil Taylor that we did a few months ago, but it's an album I discovered last year. It's great. Then after that, it's our return to classical music with Chopin's piano ballads played by Christian Zimmermann, a Polish pianist who is one of the most highly regarded pianists of the last 100 years, I guess, and he's like very well known for his Chopin interpretations. And then after that, I haven't updated the schedule yet, but I've already thought about something. So after that, it will be something completely different again. It's gonna be this female artist called Joanna Newsom and her album Yees. So it's YS, but I think it's like pronounced Yees or something like that. So it's like a chamber folk album, but it sounds like very much like classical music almost, but with vocals. So it's like a very dense album, very critically acclaimed album, great stuff. And then after that, it's actually an album that you might have heard, Altaz might have heard before, because it's such a famous pop album from the 80s. But whether you have heard it or not, I think we should talk about it. It's such a big classic. So it's Sign of the Times of Prince by Prince. Yeah,
Okay.
80s pop legend Prince. So Sign of the Times.
You won't believe it, but I don't think I've listened to that. I haven't listened to too much Prince, to be honest. So
Well, this is a good opportunity to.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah. It's a double album, so yeah, it's a bit of a longer one, but yeah.
Oh, very exciting list. So
Yeah.
I'm looking
And
forward to all
a
of
bit
it.
of everything from jazz to pop to folk to classical. So, and that's my plan in the future, that again there will be a mix of lots of different genres, and both like big classics that you will find in the critic canon lists, but then also these bit more weirder picks that not as many people have heard of.
Yeah, I've been enjoying how you're doing it. It's actually increasing my appreciation for everything I listen to.
Yeah.
Because you just start thinking about the music differently, or even when it's lyrics, you start thinking about it differently and stuff. So I've been really enjoying it. So I appreciate that.
And Tony will absolutely love that Joanna Newsom and Prince picks, as they are both some of his favorite artists. So.
Okay, great.
So yeah, we can end the episode now. So look out for future episodes about both films and music, or just one of those art forms if you are more into one of them. But yeah, thanks for watching. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.